Welcome to episode 213 of the CUInsight Experience. I'm Randy Smith, one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com.
And I'm Jill Nowacki, the president and CEO of Humanidei.
This episode is brought to you by the Sheeter Group, a leading executive benefits firm that meets your retention and succession needs. This includes non-qualified benefit plans, short and long-term incentive plans, compensation studies, scorecard design, performance evaluation, and more. You can learn more about them at sheetergroup.com.
We're glad to be here today, and we're glad to have you here with us. We've been having conversations with credit union leaders who are doing the work, not just in their organizations, but on themselves too. Today's guest is someone we both admire deeply and a good friend of ours, Patty Corkery, the president and CEO of the Michigan Credit Union League.
This episode is all about releasing to evolve, and we're excited to explore that with Patty, digging into the shifts in identity, mindset, in leadership that comes in as we move on to senior roles.
We talk a lot about learning as leaders, but sometimes the hardest part of growth is actually unlearning. Giving up what worked before, letting go of control, trusting others, letting your role shift without feeling like you're losing who you are.
With Patty today, we're looking forward to talking about what great leaders must leave behind to keep moving forward, the habits we outgrow, the need to redefine ourselves, and the surprising ways that letting go can lead to even greater impact.
So follow along with us at home. Think about this as you listen. What's something you might need to unlearn? What would it look like to loosen your grip, release control, and evolve forward?
All right, let's dive right into this conversation. Welcome back to the show, Patty. But this time you get to be with Jill also.
Yay!
Hey, thanks for having me, both of you.
We were excited for this. We've obviously had many conversations with the microphone off, so this should be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Hopefully I said off the record when I needed to during those private conversations.
Yeah. I guess this is the only record I have. So,
Okay.
Right? So, unless you say it here.
Got it.
I'll start with the first question. It's for you, Patty. If leadership came with the baggage claim, the last time we saw you, I think we were in Paris and you were there with your daughter. So it was obviously, your way around an airport. What's something you've had to leave behind on that baggage carousel to keep moving forward?
My thought on this question, it's kind of related, but it goes off into a little tangent, but it's similar. And it's something that I think I'm going to actually write a blog about. And I'm curious what your perspectives on the old adage, fake it till you make it.
We talked about that on a recent podcast.
You did? Oh gosh, I'm clearly behind. All right. Well, I did not listen to that. So maybe you shared your perspectives there. But I think I've been reflecting on it more. And I love it in the lyric, right, of that Taylor Swift song. I think it can be like, fake it till you make it. And I did type thing, kind of empowering. But one of the things that I hear from folks, like when I'm talking in a group or talking from the main stage, is people come up and say, you just seem so genuine. You seem so yourself. You seem like approachable, you seem this, you seem that. And it brought me back to when I was a young law student. Between the second and third year of law school, you try and get a job at a big law firm, right? Because that's like the bigger money. And these are these intimidating places where they work you a ton. And the interview process is pretty intense. And I was very much myself during that time, but I was also very inexperienced, insecure, and totally out of my comfort zone going into these large law firm offices. That was just so out of my ordinary. And I was very much myself, and I didn't get any offers. I didn't get any job. And they would ask me questions like, what do you see yourself doing in 10 years? And my real answer was, I have no idea.
No one does.
I had to come up with something. So I said something like, well, I'd like to maybe be in teaching, or maybe teaching at a university or law school. That sounds appealing. And I rambled on some other stuff. But the correct answer was a partner in this firm, or something that's going to bring them money. So I didn't get one of those jobs. And it was like the best thing that ever happened to me that I didn't get them, because that wasn't where I fit in. That wasn't where I belonged. But if I faked it, right, and really rehearsed a bunch of answers that weren't really genuine to get that job, I wouldn't have performed well. I don't think I would have been successful. And most importantly, I don't think I would have been happy there. So it's like, how much of this do you want to fake it? So I think to kind of tie it back to your question, something I've left behind, I don't know if I consciously thought about it or not, at times in my career being somebody that I wasn't. It wasn't really to get a job so much as it was to be liked or to get invited into the room or to be invited to the dinner, those types of things. I kind of left all of that behind of not being genuine to myself, because every time I've just been myself, it's really worked to my advantage. So that's been something that comes for me with a lot of maturity, and into my 50s now. I'm finally accepting a lot more and really understanding a lot more. But just trying to say something maybe insincere or not true to myself to be in the in crowd or to get the invite is not something I bother doing anymore.
When Patty started that, I was like, I get that too. So I so appreciate kind of what the context and the rest of it. But I'll often get that, oh, you're so genuine or you're so authentic as a leader. And I'm like, does that mean I don't seem like I have strong enough executive presence? Like, am I not grown up enough? You're so approachable. And it's like, should I be less approachable? And only once has it ever, and one time it actually was delivered to me in this sense of, and it was when I was a league president. And it was kind of like, you're so approachable. Even this teller thinks they can come talk to you. And it's like, well, why couldn't they? Yeah, like we're all humans here, right? And so only once has it ever been delivered by a like, ooh, do you think maybe you need to elevate your status a bit? Which didn't change me, evidently, because I still get that whole like, oh, you're so approachable.
Oh, you get that too, yeah.
Oh yeah. So, which I mean, like, if you were to ask me, like, would you rather be standoffish and like I'm totally going to choose approachable every time, but it's still like for whatever reason. And maybe it's that like, ooh, am I not faking it enough that I just did my business suit posture right there that nobody saw it. So
we saw it.
I mean, but on that, like I remember making pretty much a hard and intentional reset on the way I was going to be. And a lot of that was around the beginning of CUInsight from my previous life, always in a suit and tie and all, that type of thing. I was like, oh, I can be an internet guy or something. But it was more being comfortable in myself. I wear jeans a lot. I wear the same black t-shirt a lot. But I know early in my career, that wasn't the case. It was the blue suit. It was exactly what you thought you had to look like to look successful, maybe even. And a lot of that came to I very much grew up on the fake it till you make it. It's an interesting thing. And this is going to totally go down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but Jill's son Crosby just had his 8th grade graduation. And one of the things that I found myself judging the principal and teachers on was when they received their certificate, they were all fist bumping. And I was like, isn't this like a time that like in certain settings you shake hands? There is still that formalness. And I'm like, or am I old? And that's all that is. Why am I up here judging people for fist bumping instead of shaking hands, right? I guess I would ask that is some of those things that we did learn, are they necessary to let go necessarily? Or when we think of like the way business is done, is there like the formality of it? And I know that has changed a lot in all of our careers, but is there still some of that out there? I guess I don't. Like I said, total rabbit hole. We don't even have to go there.
Yeah. And I think the concept of faking it to make it, if it's meant to give somebody confidence, like if you don't think they're confident enough, and that's kind of your pep talk to them to be like, manifest these skills that you are the next senior VP or whatever, fake that attitude, and that'll help kind of, if you fake it enough, it'll ultimately become ingrained in you on some level. But it's like, I think it's tricky. I think we got to be careful with that advice, but it is interesting. It's a great topic.
One of the things when we were kind of putting together the questions and the script and thinking about this episode that I kept, if you want, just like laughing internally on is, even to this day, when we go to a conference, everything we've learned along the way is always what we need to do. Mm-hmm. Like we're never really taught on what you shouldn't be doing still, right. Or like what you shouldn't do anymore, that type of a thing. And that was, I kept thinking about just all the things where it's like, I'm sure we've all gotten to that point where it's, why am I still doing that? And we may tell ourselves that we like it. So we want to do that, even if it maybe doesn't make sense in the grand scheme of things. So,
yeah, it's such a cycle.
Like in strategic planning, like with an organization, there's an activity that's often done like that start, stop, continue, right? Like what's something we should start doing to get better? What's something we should stop doing? And, what are we doing well that we should continue to do? But I don't know how often we as leaders do that exercise with ourselves and how like what's something I need to start doing? What's something I need to stop doing? And what can I continue doing? And that if we think about it, we often don't think about it in this exact moment, but if we can think back to 5 years ago when we had maybe a different role, or 10 years ago, or back early on in the journey, like what's something that served us well that we had to do at that point, and that if we were doing that start, stop, continue, we would evaluate and say, well, I better stop doing that in order to be able to move forward more. So, reflecting on that, Patty, has it been 2 years since you stepped into the current role?
CUSG, it'll be a year, July 1 for officially taking over. But yeah, I think when I reflect on that, it's definitely this need that I think a lot of women especially feel, and that is to be liked. And it's tricky. It's tricky to have that mindset of being around a table, wanting folks to like you, but then ultimately being the highest ranking person in the room that actually has to make the decisions, which is going to disappoint people or discourage people or fill in the blank. So I've really had to work on letting that go, because I just have to be okay with it. And in an effort to kind of have this harmonious, fun environment, am I not being clear enough because I'm not being direct enough? Because again, going back to do I sound too quote unquote bossy or too whatever? And I think that's also something women kind of struggle with. So I've been trying to get better at that. I am getting better. And I've left some meetings reminding myself, not everyone needs to like you. It's okay. It's okay. I definitely say that to myself.
Yeah, you don't have to be the mayor of everyone.
I know, exactly. I don't know if I'll be reelected by my team, but
the self-talk just sounds like buck up, Patty, and deal with it. Not everybody's going to like you. Or have you had to like redefine, okay, if I used to think success was being the most well-liked, now I think success is being...
So I think in answer to that, Jill, it's probably more of the first part, which is probably just, it's okay. And that people don't like you, instead of doing a ton of self-analysis on it, which is probably another flaw. I don't spend enough time digging deeper on my own head space, but it's been a tough one for me to work on.
There is a question I was excited to ask, and it was one that I've always, similar to a question that I've always asked on the podcast, but that idea of like most of the people on the podcast are in senior leadership positions. And there tends to be that idea that a lot of the times they're like that success came from hard work and doing the job well and doing all of those things. And then as you become a senior leader, you have to let some of that go. You're now managing people in a team. Can you think back on something that like maybe served you well earlier in your career that you look at now and you're like, I need to get away from that, even if I was good at it?
Yeah, in a way, I think it kind of ties back to the same answer. I think being likable and approachable has gotten me a lot outside of when I'm really being looked at to give direction and make decisions. So I think in general, I think we really downplay likability. And I know we can all think of people that have been successful leaders, but you're not really saddling up to them at a reception because they're not approachable or they don't seem very genuine or whatever it might be.
Or likable.
Yeah, or likable. And so I do think it has gotten me pretty far. And I do think we discount that a bit in terms of a good skill to have. So that genuineness and things that Jill was commenting on earlier too, I think does get us far. But I think one of the things that I realized I do is sometimes I can be kind of sarcastic, poking fun at people or joking. And I don't think I offend people, but I do bring humor a lot in. And sometimes I think I do that too much. And sometimes I think it's kind of fallen flat when I'm with my team. So that's another one that kind of comes to mind.
You got to leave that for Mark Ridley's.
That idea of it's sort of similarly related, but there's this, when you go through your career and you're used to being approachable and you're used to being likable and you can use your sense of humor. And if it's a little bit sarcastic, that's okay up to a point. But I was talking to somebody once and they said one of the key pieces of advice, they moved into a senior role at the NCUA and they were given the advice of be cognizant that in these halls, your whisper is a roar. And so this idea of once you get to a certain point of esteem, what you say becomes much more weighted, much more heavy. So at the CEO level, a suggestion that you might want to think about becomes you better go do this, right? And so that's an interesting thing because particularly if you've lived your life being really approachable, being really likable, not being concerned about my status or my title or like you may not be aware of the weight that your words carry. And so that lighthearted joke becomes, oh my gosh, does Patty not like me?
Right.
Oh my gosh, does Patty think I'm dumb? Oh my gosh, is my career in trouble? Because, and no, you were just being friendly, like being your usual jokey around self. And so hearing that statement was really something that made me go, because I see myself as being so approachable. And so like, of course they would know I'm joking. It's me. But like, nope. And I'm also lost, right?
I was thinking about that on the flip side, though, even too, being in the leadership position, kind of joking about things that I thought I was serious about. And then when it doesn't get done, they're like, oh, you really wanted us to do that. You made a joke afterwards, right? Like, I was like, oh, no, I was serious just because I was smiling. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, I think those tips Jill gives us, like how to end a meeting, it goes a long way just to bring everybody back to what the expectations are and what are we doing from here and doing that recap, which I've been trying to incorporate because then if I wasn't clear, because my thing is I will, same thing Jill said earlier, like either when is Patty brainstorming, when is it something she actually wants done? And I need to bring some clarity to that. But then just kind of closing it, okay, what are our next steps? You're going to be doing this, you're going to be doing that. And then being consistent that way. Because sometimes I still think back to meetings and I'm like, was I really clear that it's been a month. I haven't heard from anyone. What's happening?
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay, was it me? Is it them? I don't know.
Well, I had an enlightening moment, and I guess I'll know soon if my team listens to the podcast or not when I tell this story. But I was talking to one of my team members, and there was like 1 week where I had sent like 3 questions in different times, and nobody answered any of them. And like it was a question to everyone, but like I did it like 3 different times. And the team member who was talking to me about it was like, yeah, I noticed that you get left on red a lot. And I was like, and she was being like, she was apologetic about it, right? But I'm like, maybe I need to send less messages or something. Like, if this is like, what does that say? And that kind of and like, do I need to be saying, like, I'm not just putting this out here as thoughts by Jill, but it's actually like I actually want your thoughts back on this. Like, I'm trying to engage in a dialogue. And so there is definitely some value in that clarity of, is this me pontificating or is this me looking for feedback?
Do you do that a lot via email to where they think that?
Well, like you think about different communication channels. And so I'm a fully remote team. I feel like if I send an email, there's a certain expectation of response time versus if I send a Teams chat, it's different. So like in my mind, a Teams chat is kind of like when you're in the same office building and you sort of pop in and say, hey, how was your weekend? Or, oh, did you see that report or whatever? Right. Whereas like an email is maybe more like we actually scheduled a time to talk and do this. But that's how I think. It's not like I've said, hey, if I pop something in a Teams chat, that's me pretending like we're sitting in the break room together. So like they don't know what I think unless I clarify that.
Just look up from their book and then look back down.
Yeah, right? So. It feels like I walk into the break room to get my coffee and they're like all sitting there and I come in, just gets dead silence. I leave, they start.
It's lonely at the top, Jill.
Oh, it does. That's right. I mean, to either one of you, this was one that was bouncing around my head too, that held on to something too long, where something that, whether it was a project or a company or that leadership style, then even if you realized it was time to let it go, you still just do it.
every assessment I take, and I take a lot of assessments because to get certified in doing an assessment, you know, take one. They go so that you know how to translate it. And I feel like every assessment I take puts me in a category of not quite chasing squirrels and shiny objects, but certainly more prone to what's the next fun thing we can do instead of I'm going to hold on to this thing. And so the question doesn't really resonate with me because I am someone who has a tendency to be so excited about and open to change. That said, I think that occasionally where, you know, not so much on projects or beliefs, but early in my career, I heard this and I accepted it to be true. And it's this idea of hire slow and fire fast. And so I think early in my career, I was someone who's like, boy, if this person seems like they might be a problem for the organization, get them out right away before they ruin anything else. And as my career has evolved, and I don't necessarily think I've gotten more patient as I've gotten older, but I think I have gotten more willing to kind of say, for one thing, the hire slow side of it, you can hire as slow as you want. There are still some uncertainties in hiring, and there is a point where you do have to make a decision and you're not going to know for sure about that. So I probably hire a little faster now than maybe I would have before. And then the fire fast side of it, I believe in giving people chances, giving people opportunities, like co-creating that experience where they can be successful. And Randy's face right now says that he thinks maybe in the 10 or so years we've been together that I give people lots of chances on that. But I do think that that's probably a belief that I think maybe for the first 15 years of my career, I probably held on to that harder than I did for the last 10. That's one that I think I accepted sort of blindly and held on to that I'm not sure I've subscribed to that idea anymore. So
Right.
On either side of it.
It's definitely something lawyers encourage people to do is
Right.
they do. That's the mantra of it.
As long as there's documentation, huh?
Yeah, exactly. 100%. So you be careful with it. Good balance.
A podcast and legal advice.
Exactly. I think, though, one of the things that comes to mind, and it's not so much from the work front because I'm similar to Jill. I'm pretty flexible. I can't really think of anything that I've held on to that I need to let go. I think, though, in the communication realm, one thing I've had to really let go of is expectation of return calls or return emails outside of the workplace. So in the works, I do expect, especially if I'm asking a question, that people respond. And for the most part, that's been working out okay. But when you translate that to personal lives or friends, it's like they're slower. They're slower because they've got lives that you're not their job. But I am fast in both ways. Like I am always quick to respond to people but my friends, the majority of them do not. And so a friend of mine has had to kind of counsel me through this and talk me through that. Don't take it personal. So I've gotten better at that, but it's hard. It's hard when it's a friend and they're like, wow, I texted them like 4 days ago, or I invited them to this thing 2 weeks ago and no one's like, what does all this mean? So I've let go of that because I really practice trying to give people the benefit of the doubt, or they just forgot. Like, take it easy on people. These are not your employees. They are not required to get back to you, and chill out. It's hard though.
The only notification I get on my phone is if Jill messages. So that's, or all others are shut off. So I am not timely about any communication with anybody else. But
So Randy, on this idea of that kind of letting go to move into the next thing, we talked several times on the show, just recently had Lauren Culp on as a guest, but like you've had some of these career evolutions too, and certainly had to go from kind of being all things externally facing on CUInsight to being just a podcast host.
What do you do?
In that, what lessons did you learn about letting things go along the way? And maybe I'm holding you up a little bit in high regard as someone who's really successfully let some of the things go to move into more of what you want out of life too. So what's your journey on that?
At first, I would say I could never imagine being where I am today, or the things that I had to let go when I first started. When Dave and I started CUInsight, it was doing everything. It was touching every piece, what would become CUInsight. And now to transition to a point where I don't touch any of it daily is a fascinating thing. And it took time, and it was a transition over time. I struggled, I think, in the beginning up until even the Lauren point, and having Jill in the same house to coach me was a very valuable thing. But one of the big things was when a question was asked of me, I almost thought I had to have the answer. Or if I did have my answer, I had the answer, but that necessarily, I didn't have to have the answer for everything. So like even that idea of like asking the question back, well, what would you do before I give mine? Jill's done so much strategic planning for us, and she tells me every single time before I go in, you talk last, because I love to talk. So, quite honestly, when it was just Dave and I did all the talking. So that was, I think, a big change. The other thing for me was, and in my head, I say it the same way, but I know it kind of comes out a little maybe insensitive or wrong, but that idea of what's below my pay grade, I've taken that even into life in a sense where it's just like, if I don't want to do it, if I can better spend my time doing something else, I have not wanted to clean the house for many, many years. Somebody else can do that. That's worth paying somebody else to do than for me to do it. And I kind of look at everything in a sense of that, whether that's if somebody asked me to speak at something, if somebody is requesting my time, I'm like, maybe it's not the pay grade thing, but I really do measure that. Like if something takes up space in my calendar, there has to be huge value because that's filling up the space that something else can't, that I might find a ton of value in. And that to me it's a privilege to be able to be in a place that I can do that more often than say I could have before. But it's also something very intentionally that I've done for many years. I would probably say 15 years. It's been a very intentional thing that's that kind of saying no to stuff is a wonderful thing. But that was something I had to let go. I mean, big time, because I used to say yes to everything, and I am an introvert, and everything drains me.
A lot of people who see themselves as servant leaders, and a lot of people see themselves as servant leaders, really struggle with that, what you just said of like, ooh, it feels bad to say that's below my pay grade. And like, also there's a school of thought that is this, like, I'm not going to ask anybody to do something I wouldn't do from that organization. And I think it's really important for people at any level of an organization to reframe that idea of, oh, I'm not going to do it because it's below my pay grade, to this idea instead of, I'm not going to do that because that's not where I can contribute at my highest value. And so, candidly, I'm not as good at cleaning our house as someone else.
Who's cleaning your house
right?
over there? Between the two of
That's
you.
Her name is Lucy. But to that end, it's like I do something. And so in that case, it's like in our personal life, I am the only person who can be Crosby's mom. And so if I'm traveling for work a lot and then it's Saturday and I want to deliver the product of a happy child and a clean house, like I can outsource the housekeeping, but I can't outsource the parenting. And we can make those decisions often quite easily in our personal life, but sometimes in our work life, we say, oh, well, but like, I'm not above any of this. And that recognition of, but is it truly where you're contributing at the highest level? And your obligation to your organization is to give that specialized high value contribution that you really are the best in the organization at doing. And no matter where you are in the organization, you have that thing. So it doesn't matter if you are the CEO or if you are a branch manager, like there is something you do that is your highest value contribution. And if you're spending your time doing something other than that, you're robbing the organization of the talent that you can bring from that. It's a different way to think about it than it's below my.
Well, we also Jerry has so much time, like each one of us does. So if everything we do takes away from that clock, right? So
I think that's such great advice, Jill, especially like you said, with this dynamic of servant leadership, and there's a CEO in the trenches doing the stuff there, especially I think some of it also comes back to what you grew up with. My family, we didn't hire anyone to do anything. We did it all because we didn't have the means to pay a bunch of workers. So when a task needed to be done, we were doing it. And so I think you kind of carry that badge of honor too. From humble beginnings, it's a little harder, I think, to have that mindset of saying no to certain things. You see your team over there assembling a bunch of stuff and they're really running behind, but you're on your way to this other meeting and you're kind of pulled to like, well, I'm not above stuffing gift bags or whatever the case might be. So I think there's going to be a lot of people wanting to get what you said, Jill, on a mug, which is just like, no. That's not me contributing at my highest level. I love it. That's really good advice. Not surprising from you.
There's something that Jill said earlier that I kind of want to go back to about like in the strategic planning, the idea of like, what are we starting, stopping, continuing? One of the things that I know I have struggled with is when something is still seems successful. You know, the writing's on the wall. You know that like it's coming towards the end. There's not the growth potential, maybe even. Again, I'm a firm believer in limited amounts of time and that resources and energy. So evolving to do what would be better off in the future than continuing what may still be working and maybe made us successful in the past.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Well, I mean, the thing that comes to mind, especially in league land where everything we do is such a cycle, you're doing the same thing over and over again every year, especially in the event space. You know, your hike the hills, the things that you're organizing for people. So it's so easy to get caught up in this. This is how we do this. This is the schedule. This is when we do this. And we were talking about our annual convention because it was just last week in Grand Rapids, so it was top of mind. But even prior to that, I think after our last one, it's like we're having the event, golfing on Wednesday, the events Thursday and Friday, including Friday night, and then people leave Saturday morning. It's like, well, we're seeing a drop off in people leaving and because they want to get home for the weekend. Yeah. And so it's like, why aren't we starting these on Tuesday? Right. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It seems so, as I'm saying it, people are probably like, oh my gosh, they're so dumb. Why did? But you get so into your cycle. You move things around or you do this and do that. But it's like switching the actual days. And then that takes a couple of years to put into action because you're under contract with these hotels years in advance. But it's like, I think sometimes it's helpful to really pull back from just stop and to pull back and really look, bigger picture. Because I think a lot of the stuff we do is just repeated, whether it's how we're holding meetings, how we're doing our board materials, how we're presenting. You get caught in this kind of rut because it's just easier. It's easier than revamping your whole board materials, starting with a whole new template or a whole new look, even though they're kind of boring and dry. And I've been really trying to challenge myself to just, is this still the right way? Kind of what you're going back to, the start, stop, keep doing. But for me, it's like not so much starting and stopping, but changing, doing it differently, especially when you're taking over for a CEO who had their own way of doing things, which worked for them. And then bringing the team along with you for that journey. It's not me actually doing the work, as we know. It's me kind of re-envisioning it and then encouraging them to do it differently, which is another, challenge because they're used to doing it their way. And it takes time to redo things. So it's all of that kind of comes to mind. And it's been something that I'm not anywhere near there yet, but it's a process.
That's kind of like the flip side to me. That question is like the exact opposite of the question earlier of like, what's something you've held on too long to? And it's kind of this idea. And so this one to me, I'm like, just like breathing. That idea of like, yeah, like it's always fun to see how you can take something to the next level. Or it seems like it's working, but you could change it. And so isn't that exciting? And I think I
think the three of us, we can all admit 40 minutes in, all like change. Yeah. We enjoy to live in that space, a little bit of uncertainty. So,
but what a sort of moment to pause and say, and that's where some self-awareness comes in, because I think it's like, there are plenty of people out there who would say, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And oh, by the way, we're already busy. Like we're already moving through this cycle. So don't just throw this little cherry bomb in there to spice things up for us when we already got this going. And that's where
like the spice. Come on.
That ability to say, just because I think it would be fun or I'm getting bored with the way we're doing things. And probably in that case, something that I have to discipline myself to do is not just to go with gut in that situation, but really like when it starts to feel like it's time to evolve, taking that opportunity to actually do some research, some evaluation, look more into kind of what the market is. So you relied on data. People were leaving before the conference was done, not just like, wouldn't it be fun if? And so I think that's a really important element for it, even if you're someone who maybe doesn't jump at the chance to change things, but to be able to know that feedback is really important and taking the time to solicit that, because recognizing your gut might lead you astray from time to time too.
For sure.
Before we kind of wrap up, there was one question that I did want to ask, because all three of us, we have conversations with a lot of CEOs and senior leaders and things like that. Is there something that either one of you see people holding on to too long that you're like, that's getting in the way of their teams, their organization, their whatever? Kind of that question, I think, from the past shows of like, what makes a good CEO? What's something that people are doing that they're just holding on to from the past?
Guilty of it, but still absolutely willing to advise others on it. You do not need that many direct reports. Like whoever you are, you do not need that many direct reports. And I think that's the hardest thing to let go of when people move into CEO roles, because there's this deep desire to really know what's going on across the organization. And because it feels like an insult to a team member who was reporting to the CEO who now no longer is going to. It feels like a demotion. It feels like a challenge. And so we as leaders want to keep our people close. And so we end up often having more direct reports than is maybe in the best interest of those direct reports and ourselves and ultimately our organization. So that's what I notice senior leaders hanging on to too long is the number of direct reports that they might have. And what gets in the way of releasing it is both the relationship and the desire to know what's happening. Like you want to know what's going on. So.
Yeah. So is that like if you're telling a direct report that they're no longer going to be your direct report, maybe we can use that line that you just taught us. No, this is not me contributing at the highest level.
That's right. That's right.
Wow. I got nothing else to add. I'm just going to say that, yeah, I'm totally guilty of that as well. And I think CEOs, have evolved. There's been such a change in the landscape from a lot of people retiring. I think some CEOs hung in a bit longer to get their credit unions through COVID. And now in Michigan, and I think around the country, we're seeing a lot of newer CEOs. I think it's getting better. But there are still some that are somewhat traditional, and them talking first, them sitting at the head of the conference table, kind of not really evolving into at least acknowledging the pros of some hybrid work for your team here and there. And, I think some people are kind of stuck in traditional norms. And I think that those people, they're often found at places where they're just very internal and they don't get out too much. They're just very focused on their credit union and they're not going to a lot of events or reading a bunch of books, I'm suspecting, on leadership. They're just kind of old school. So I do think the comment you made earlier, Randy, that Jill gave you is speak last. I think that is so helpful. I do not like uncomfortable silences, so I'm always quick to add if there's a lull, and I've been getting better at doing that. But I think there's some teams that I've observed that wait to hear from the CEO first. Mm-hmm. So they don't feel comfortable until they see where the CEO is first, because they don't want to disagree or say an opinion contrary to what the CEO will say. So I do think there's still some of that going on for sure.
All right. Well, we knew we could talk for a long time here. So yeah. I'm going to start wrapping this up. But before we sign off, something we've been trying to do this season is to leave a takeaway from each one of us. What's good conversation without one? So we'll part some wisdom. Patty, we'll end with you since we're kind of springing it on you. But Jill, you go first, then I'll throw mine out, and then we'll save the best for last. No pressure, right?
What I'm going to take away from this, the thing that's going to stick with me, this is completely going to be my positive affirmation, self-talk, is when somebody's like, you're so approachable, you're so authentic, I'm going to be like, if they say it to Patty, it's definitely a compliment. And so I'm going to start owning that feedback when I get it, because I do think I've been holding on to this. Oh, it means I'm not I'm not serious enough, I'm not corporate enough, I'm not executive enough, and being able to reframe that. So that idea of being approachable is a good thing, and it's something that it's okay to keep that with me as I evolve and continue to grow my career. That approachability is something that it's okay I haven't let go of.
Right.
For me, and it's something that I think rings in my head a lot, is the idea that if we want to keep growing, whether it's as an organization or professionally or personally, we kind of have to keep releasing stuff. We only have so much bandwidth, resources, whatever you want to call it. And to me, there isn't any other way. So that idea of, gosh, it scares me to think of. I'll go back to the interview question that you had looking for an internship at a law firm. Where do you want to be in 10 years? I can tell you I've been a completely different person in all decades, basically. So that just continues to change. And I've enjoyed quite a few of them. But that idea of releasing things isn't bad. That's how we grow. So I'll leave it with that.
Yeah. Well, I think I've mentioned it a couple times since Jill said it about, I think, trying to move away from, being worried about being liked and kind of just really leaning into what is best for the organization. What are they paying me to do? So I'm getting better, but continue on the path of being comfortable saying no, that I contribute in different ways, and either reallocate somebody else to that, to just stay true to, really what my contributions are supposed to be. So I think that is my big takeaway from this conversation.
There you go. That's a wrap. Before we go, a few quick things. Thank you, Patty, for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's great talking to you both.
Everything we talked about today, as always, is linked to in the show notes. Reach out to us on LinkedIn. We love hearing from you. What's resonating with you? Maybe what's not. Also, who you'd like to have on the show or what topics you'd like us to cover. We would love to engage, and LinkedIn seems to be the best place. A big thank you again to our sponsor, the Sheeter Group, leading executive benefits firm and big time supporters of the show. We sure appreciate them. If you haven't subscribed yet to the podcast, now's the time. We're on all the different podcast platforms, whether it's Apple or Spotify or Amazon. And of course, a huge thank you to all of you for listening. You all rock. We hope our paths cross soon. Be well, friends. Until next time.